Well, hello, Author Nation. We are back in frosty Texas.
Chilly Austin. Yeah, man. I did not expect that. So,
well, last time we were in steamy St. Pete's.
That's right.
48 hours before the hurricane.
That's right.
So
quite a difference all around. And yeah, happy to have missed the hurricane, but man, so many people took a hit from that. Man, yeah, that one was bad.
Yep.
So, well, we don't have anything like that happening in Austin, but we are not used to cold here. So the fact that it's below freezing right now throws everybody off. It's just not what you think of when you think of Austin.
No.
Good writing weather, man.
Yeah. Or hanging out weather.
Yeah. Get to see you in person for once.
Yeah. I love it when we can do this, where we can hang out and sit together.
And the last time was we didn't really get to hang out at Author Nation much. We had dinner a couple of times, but
yeah, I was a little busy.
Yeah. Good conference though.
How was your Author Nation?
It was good. That was the kind of experience I was hoping it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Really knew it would be, but there was always that gray area. You never knew for sure. But showing up like almost from the first second I set foot in the hotel, it was on. Like there was a high energy. Mm-hmm. Everyone I bumped into. One of the things I love about Author Nation is everyone seems to know who I am. So I get to feel like a rock star for a few days. Like I get to feel like I'm actually somebody for a few days.
Well, it should be even more so now because you helped with the MC.
Right. Yeah, man. So the whole MC thing, I think, is something I was born to do. Like, I'm just going to throw that out there. If you're looking for an MC,
well, you'll be back. Yeah. He did a great job. I think you and Mark Leslie Lefebvre really kind of took to it.
Yeah. We kind of we run in the same circles, so that makes sense. Mark and I. Yeah.
No, it came out good. And I think it helped people to kind of get warmed up into the presentation. So it's all those little things that add.
So that was a new thing, right? Like that wasn't.
That was
being MCs per se.
So there was two things. There was a lot more than this, but two things that Suze insisted on with the show. It was the couches, and that we should have MCs.
Yeah.
We'd been to a couple shows, and she's like, we need to have some people that are there to kind of get the crowd focused and to help with the messaging. I think that was kind of her biggest thing, was like, we've got all these new things. We need to keep reminding people about all these new things, and to have that happen before each session was.
Yeah. Couches came in handy. We did the Writers Inc. podcast live at the show, which I found out later was not our first live show. I wasn't part of the podcast when they did that the last time somewhere, but that was technically the second live show. But the first with
that wouldn't have even had you on if it wasn't your first.
I mean, yeah. Well, we slid that one under the radar.
Yeah.
No, but it was a really good outcome. Like, we had a lot of people show up for that. I was half worried the whole time that nobody would be there.
Yeah. No. Well, that was kind of the feel. We wanted to have at least the one room where, like, the stage felt like the rest of the conversation pit. So like you could watch the conversations on the stage. You could watch the conversation. Or you could be in your own conversation out in the mix and mingle midway.
Yeah. That midway, by the way, was like, I ran that thing. Like, I was just back and forth in that thing the whole time. If I wasn't on stage, if I wasn't hanging out with somebody, I was making rounds.
Yeah, it was midway. It was a lot of fun. I think kind of a testament to the team was, I think it was Wednesday morning. I got up. I had gotten a little bit of sleep, and I was like, you know what? I think I got time to go. I don't have to be on stage till this time. I think I got time. I can go down and have a cup of coffee and just hang out, because that's what the thing that I would say that I missed the most out of being the one running the show versus being at the show is I love to just hang out between sessions and shoot the shit with people.
Yeah. I actually had to work this one more than I have in the past, because this is the first one I've been to where I wasn't there on behalf of Drafts Digital. And, although I was working when I came, like, a big part of my job at DDD for these conferences was always to just kind of schmooze with the authors, So there's a whole lot of hanging out, funded by the DDD credit card. So I didn't have that advantage this time, but so this time it was different because I had tasks. There were things I had to make sure I was there for, make sure I was on time for, or whatever. So it did change the experience a little, but it didn't seem to impact, like, that crosstalk that happens, like, out in the crowd, like, when I'm out just kind of wandering around, like, so many people would come to me and chat with me, and sometimes they knew me from the Author Nation podcast, so they knew that I was kind of part of the thing,
Yeah.
And those conversations were some of the best. There were a lot of authors who, they had questions. They wanted to know, like, they wanted to ask about the industry and ask about things that we talked about, the things that came up in some of the talks. So I had a lot of those folks show up to, like, I did like 2 different panels.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those folks showed up there and asked some great questions. So it's just interesting because the community, we're in a really interesting community.
Mm-hmm.
No other industry I've ever worked in has had this level of community participation. I don't think I've seen that anywhere else.
Yeah, certainly that is something that, coming from other industries, is very, very different. It's what made me get engaged with this community, is to see the level that people interact and connect and how collaborative they are.
Yeah.
I think the other part that probably, and this is something, if you think back, way back when this podcast started, when we had that group together the first time in Austin, right here in Austin, we were talking about the, how the industry was changing and how it was kind of a representative of the industry changing, the show coming on. And I think that's probably what you're feeling too, is like, we're feeling that change, right? There's something about this community that's different. I hope part of it is what we're doing. And I know people don't like all this businessy stuff, but like systematizing the community, like making it so that, like, the things that you want to have happen, that we build processes so that they happen, right? Like, if you want people to congregate, you give them comfortable chairs to sit in.
Right. Who would have thought? Yeah. And coffee. I know coffee was a very expensive part of this whole thing.
One of the most, but
it sure beat me paying, $10 per cup every time I went downstairs. So I appreciate the coffee.
Yeah. I that's the whole idea. And we're, this year we're doing some, for 2025, there's a whole bunch of things we're changing from what we learned, whether it's feedback from vendors or for authors, but like in the main event center, we're going to go to all banquet rounds.
Okay.
So if you remember, we had like theater seating in the beginning, and then we had the banquet rounds in the back.
Okay. All
right. And everyone was sitting back there. Well, there's kind of like this gap. There was the people that want to be at the front of the class.
Yeah.
Right. Taking notes. And then you had a bunch of people in the back. And that was kind of an experiment we were trying to see. And the observation was there was a lot of people hanging out at those tables all the time.
Yeah.
Right. It was a great place to take meetings or just work. So we're going to do that in the whole room. And that will allow us to do more networking type things, like have theme tables for people to sit at, whether it's genre or location, geography. But we're going to play around with that to make, the networking a little more accessible for folks.
Okay. All right. And that's going to be in the main space?
Yeah, that event center.
Yeah.
So we can fit like 1,400 people around tables that way.
Yeah.
So that's part of the plan. A few other things we're not ready to announce yet, but are big deals.
Yeah. You can let me in on it after the podcast. Yeah.
So what have you been up to, man? Like, it's been a few months.
Since November? Yeah, man. Writing.
Huh?
I'm working on a book with J.D. Barker, who was at Author Nation with us. that's something he and I started, I think the official date on the file is like September of last year. So that was about the time we finished the outline. So outlining is a entirely new thing for me. Not something I normally did, but he's got this whole, Patterson model that he's implemented. So we're
it's
doing
funny.
that.
I don't mean to interrupt, but like
No.
that fact that he's got you outlining when he wasn't an outliner.
He wasn't an outliner. Patterson made him an outliner. So that's the way this outline infection works. It's like vampirism, He's brought me into the fold.
Yeah.
So So it's one of those things where it's like, by now I could have published maybe 6 books of my own in the time it's taken us to kind of craft this one. So it's a much slower process to do what we're doing, but it's because it's I'm sort of humbling myself to learn from what he's learned, which I think is something, it's not a bad lesson for I think indie authors to kind of gravitate toward. We're in this, we're experiencing a shift right now, in part due to the fact that, rapid release used to be the game, right? I would chunk out a book every 15 days or so, and, I could own a market. But at this stage, it's almost like rapid release works against you in that AI is doing like, 1,000 books a day or whatever, a crazy number of titles can come out. And so when people see you rapid release, their first assumption is, oh, he's using AI. And there's a shift, at least among the reader that I'm targeting, to they want a genuine human experience. They want to have that. They want to know that book was not spit out by a computer. They want to know that you crafted it. And so that's changing the game for me, because I'm spending less time. I'd like to think my books were always high quality, but I'm spending more time on, perfecting the craft and improving the craft and doing things just in a slightly more artisan way than I would have before. And it's a game changer. Then, in between, I'm doing a lot of, what would have been time spent writing more books. I'm actually doing more things on like Substack and, engaging with my audience more. And I am seeing results from all that.
It's interesting when you talk about what you're doing with the writing in the sense of, last night I was hosting one of the Q&A calls for TD Donnelly. He did a thing on craft and on deep character, and we were talking about, there was a question where the people asked about which point of view do you think helps you get a deeper character? Is it first person, third person? And we've got into this whole conversation around what I'm observing happen is one of the big shifts is something like point of view was really mechanical in the sense of, I'm writing this particular genre. Yeah. It does best when it's in first person. So I'm going to write in first person, and I'm going to put out a book this big. It was all about trying to make this product.
Yeah.
And where we went with it was this idea of like, well, if you're trying to make a deep character, what if you talk about your practice as a writing, and maybe you write the scene first person, then you write it third person. Yeah. Just to get it right with your practice, right?
Yeah.
It's the idea now of, if you're really looking at this as a career and you're trying to develop something that can't be done, say, in AI, then it's how do you get a little more zen and a little more focused on the act of writing,
right? And
how that isn't just about the product and the production, but how it's the improvement of the process over time, right?
Yeah.
Like, how does it help you connect with the story experience or get you 1% better as a writer from yesterday to today?
Yeah. And I do want to say that I'm not opposed to using AI as part of your workflow and process here. I mean, I use the hell out of it. not to do any of the actual writing, but I research alone has sped up for me. I was always pretty fast at the research anyway, but now it's like instantaneous. I can know, like, give me a list of all the gods in the Mayan pantheon, and I can know all that in an instant and sort it any way I want. But I think what you're hinting at, and it's like we're part of the craft, part of the concept of craft is that it's the way in which we engage and interact with that reader or audience. And so, there's a certain reader out there who doesn't mind mechanically driven stuff. I mean, they're voracious. They want to read as much as possible. But then there's the reader that's the fast reader, that's the one they're going to read every book they can get their hands on. And so they're a KU subscriber because, they can keep checking books out until they're out of books.
Yeah.
But the readers I'm interested in, the readers that I get along best with, are the ones who, they want to pick up that book and they want to love it so much that they force themselves to slow down to read it. And they take their time with it, and then when they're done, they go looking for another one just like it but different. They want the next one you wrote.
Yeah, I think that kind of circling on that, the whole idea of if you're trying to figure out how you compete when there's more books coming out in a more mechanical way, AI driven particular way, is like, well, leaning into how you make that story experience as intimate and as enjoyable as possible isn't something that you get unless you're intimate and enjoying that process when you make it.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of the same concept of, you can hear someone smiling over the phone. It's that you can get a read on what that writer was thinking and experiencing, And so that's what's truly absent from something created entirely by AI or even just created in a sort of mill-like experience. That doesn't have to be AI. We know plenty of people in this business who they have a stable of people producing work. It's not any worse. I mean, there's nothing inherently wrong with that content, but it is more content than art, and I think we're getting into an age now where a lot of readers are looking for the art more than they are the content.
Yeah, and what I've observed just in the time I've been around, there was a time where if you got the process right of like, I can hit the tropes, I can hit what the market wants, and I can do it in a timely way. There's an unmet need in the market. I can meet it.
Right.
Well, there's a lot of people that made a lot of money that way that stopped doing that for whatever reason, and they now are struggling to get back in the market. And why is that? Is, well, like that need's met. There's a lot of people meeting that need.
Yeah.
What is the need that people are looking for? Well, maybe it's some people are now looking for a little more sophisticated read. And my example is like, the shows that I grew up on that I thought were great shows, you go back and watch them now and you're like, wow, that's some horrible rowdy. Like, why did we ever think that was funny?
Right.
Right. You forget that your sophistication increases over time, and what makes for a great story changes for you as the reader, right? What you're expecting, higher stakes, you're expecting more sophistication from the storyteller and how they reveal things. And I think that, some of the stuff that you've been talking about ever since we started doing this is about like how you want to celebrate that.
Yeah. Because honestly, that's what I want to read. I mean, that's the stuff that I'm looking for. And the kind of books that I grew up with. And it's interesting because, I've gone back and looked at some of the early books I loved, and I can't get into some of them anymore. The books that I always thought of as being influential, and they were totally influential on my own writing. But when I go back and, there was a point where there was a handful of books that I reread every year. And I recently tried reading one that was a favorite, and it just wasn't hitting. It was sort of nice to revisit this old friend, but it's like when you go back to you go to like your high school reunion or something, and everyone is still everyone's still working for the local Dairy Queen or something. Like it's like that. It's like it's great to see you, buddy, but is that all the ambition you have?
Yeah, moved on.
So not to belittle people who are still at their high school job or anything, but you move on. That whole concept of you can't step in the same river twice.
Mm-hmm.
That applies to just about everything, and fiction's no different. I really hope that I'm maturing as a writer. Like I really hope that, the stuff that I wrote early on isn't my best work. I don't want that.
Yeah, you say that on a regular basis. You never want your first book to be your best book.
Yeah.
Right. Like
right. If it were all downhill from there, I'm sunk.
Yeah. Or if that's it, like it never goes uphill.
Right. Yeah. And there's plenty of examples. It's funny because there are creators out there, like look at Dan Brown, and I was actually writing about this today, so it's kind of funny. But I met Dan Brown before anyone knew who he was. He had written a book called Digital Fortress, and I was producing a computer talk radio show called Tom King's CompuTalk, and we had him as a guest on the show. And then Tom had mentioned to him that we could help. He said something about needing a new computer. He's like, "Well, I got a guy who can help you out." So we always got all these like free, products and stuff as a radio show. So like I sent him all these components for building a computer, and then I got on the phone with him and talked him through building his computer. And then so he ended up writing a thank you to us. There's an acknowledgement to Tom King's CompuTalk in Angels and Demons.
Oh, cool.
He didn't mention me for some reason, but so
the intern and
I just thought that was amazing, and I loved that book. I'm like, wow, this is an amazing book, but no one ever heard of it until they made a film for the Da Vinci Code.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, he's written some pretty, I think, and he's got his critics. So I think this stuff's amazing. It's part of the inspiration for my own archaeological thrillers. But like, no one knows about no one can name one of his other books per se.
Yeah.
Like Da Vinci Code's the only one, and that's his sort of one-hit wonder in a way, which, okay, there's the double-edged sword of hitting it big. Like, I don't want that to happen either,
Right, where you're only known for the one thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you're the Coelho medallion guy, like, yeah, and the other 150 books that are out there, So, yeah, that's what's tricky about this whole business, honestly, is we all have dreams. We all know kind of what we want. And hey, look, Dan Brown ain't hurting. I mean, the guy's got a custom built castle, but I don't, it's the same thing I would tell people when I talked about like Kindle Unlimited. Like, I didn't get into this business to be known, by this one narrow group of readers. Like, I want the whole world to know and love and respect my work. You don't get there quickly, You could get lucky.
Well, and the other thing is, given where technology is going, to think that the e-reader is going to be the end-all, be-all of ways that people digest story, is crazy. Like, when you look at my kids who are 20 years old and they've never had a cassette tape, they're like the different media that has gone through the world.
I mean, yeah, you're right.
They barely remember a DVD,
but a lot of that stuff is coming back, which is interesting.
Right, vinyl's a big surge.
That's part of what I'm calling the artisan age.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a sign, and I think for authors it's a sign that we need to pay attention to, because look at there are lots of services out there now that let you do like these bespoke, customized books that you can sell through Kickstarter or whatever. And that's Joanna Penn is kind of crushing it with that model, the direct sale model, but more than just selling direct. It's you're selling an experience That's the thing I think we need to take home. That's the thing I think, whether we intended it or not, was an underlying theme of Author Nation this past year.
Well, I'll give you
experience.
I'll give you I was watching Willow talk about that because she's really big in these custom books.
Yeah.
And one of the pieces of research she threw out during her presentation was that there's a group of people that are buying these custom books to decorate homes, just to make the home sell for more when they sell the home.
Right.
Right. Like, so there's now
That's not want that either.
But it's like, you never know why like you have a customer there and you pleased them.
Right.
That the experience they want is like, oh, this is a beautiful book. It's a piece of art. They maybe don't read any books.
Right.
But it served a purpose in their life.
Right.
Right. So, I'm not saying that you should just get an interior decorating, but the point is that, why these things are happening and why people choose to give you money. It's always about an experience, right?
Yeah.
They see more value in what you're doing than that money sitting in their bank account.
Right. Yeah. And we're in challenging times economically right now, so that you're going to have to offer a much bigger experience to capture those very valuable dollars. But I think that's good for us.
Yeah.
We're learning how to stretch and grow from this. And we should be looking around and learning. This is something, man, I really wish more authors would embrace. And it's kind of the premise behind my the Wordslinger podcast, which one of the reasons why I'll bring on random people from different industries, not just publishing, guys who make, thermal windows or whatever, I'll bring in these people because they have something to share that, we need to observe this and ask ourselves. We need to get really good at asking ourselves, how do I apply that to what I'm doing? And, we were talking earlier about Drew on his keynote.
Drew Davis. Yeah.
Drew Davis, and who's a great guy who I interviewed him recently on my show.
He'll be back in 2025.
And I can't wait. He owes me some drinks. He doesn't know that yet though. But the thing was, like, you and I were talking about how there was someone complained that, it was very like business energy kind of presentation and they didn't think it applied. And I'm just floored by that.
Yeah.
Because just listen to what he's saying. Like, I could think of, I thought of 100 ways to apply what he was saying before I ever even left that room. Like, I was on my phone changing titles for blog posts and, like it was if you are willing to put enough brain power behind, considering the options, you can take a lot of this stuff from all over the place. It doesn't have to all come from, one place.
Right. Well,
industry.
That's why we brought somebody like him in. And, as an author that's watching this, they should relate, is like, we tend to focus on the negative stuff, like the 1-star review.
Yeah.
There was far more people that said either to my face or wrote to us and said, that's the best presentation I've ever seen ever in 15 years, let alone at any author show.
Yeah.
And, just like you're bringing the thermal window guy, we're looking for folks like that to come into the community to be that spark, to challenge you. It's like, if I can't help it if it didn't trigger that, but far more many people were, oh my God, I've got a list of notes now.
Yeah.
That's something out of that is going to be the next big thing.
Yeah. That's exactly where I was going to come from.
Yeah.
And I know that the first tier of that is to think of it as being like very inspirational for the sort of marketing side of writing. But I find myself going back to that in my head, even as I'm crafting chapters in my novels, because like that element of surprise he's talking about, like, that's how you build tension in a scene.
Yeah.
So like he was giving craft advice in the middle of this thing under a different name.
Right. Well, like some people like, oh, I want something more practical to books. He took a crappy FreshBooks commercial.
Yeah. And then,
and
that was genius.
Yeah. And then took Ice Road Truckers episode and applied that because he used to be a producer, and then applied that and made the FreshBooks commercial with the same content, just by moving it around and changing how it came into something that kept your attention.
Right.
Like, you know,
and how do you not look at that as an author and say, okay, I could apply that same idea to this scene I just wrote? Like, how do you, it floors me that anyone would object to that, because it's like taking a class. I guess it's subtle, I guess, you know? So,
well, I'll put a different twist on it. This is a little meaner twist.
Okay.
I
wasn't going to argue mean.
Yeah. Well, maybe, but here's the thing to keep in mind. There are authors that were in that audience that, like you, learned that, are now applying that to their product.
Right.
So if you're not, understand the other guy's product is going to have that curiosity gap built into it.
Yeah.
And it's going to be at that level. And that's what we're trying to do, is give you that first mover advantage on that stuff.
Yeah.
But if you come away from that and we're like, I got nothing out of it. It's like, oh no, it's worse than you not getting nothing out of it. Like, because the other guys did.
Right.
And they're going to be moving forward. And I think that, one of the things we're doing behind the scenes is building the tools to allow you to start to pull these things together. So is there things from Tony Lee's craft and TD Donnelly's craft session and Drew's presentation that somehow we can glean out of that database and give something novel that changes how you write?
Right.
That's where we're going to start applying AI in an assistive way to help authors to kind of dig into that stuff and be like, oh, wow. When I say into the database, I want to understand the curiosity gap. Mm-hmm. Where's that information? And it says, well, go look at this guy's craft presentation and this guy's project. And then you start to learn how to apply that stuff.
Yeah. That's the whole point of, conferences like this one. But that's one of the reasons so many of us have author facing podcasts and that sort of thing like that. We're sharing what we know, but it's a two-way, it's a participative. I'm never going to be able to say it. I know it's a sport that we all participate in.
Yeah.
And so.
Well, what you say you're writing.
Yeah.
What's some other cool stuff I know you've shared with me, but you think people should be thinking about with?
I'm playing around with. So I'm someone who, once I discover a new toy, I want to figure out how to break it as quick as possible, and rebuild it. But like some of the things I've been doing lately around AI have proven pretty fun and useful for me. One of the recent ones was I loaded all my Kotler books into Notebook LM, which is Google's tool, which has been is a real handy in a whole lot of ways. But one of the things it does is you can generate this audio overview, and for whatever reason only Google knows, they have a male voice and female voice AI, and they treat the content like it's a podcast. And so I thought, well, I'm just gonna. I downloaded that for every single one of those Kotler books, and then I used now I can't remember the name of it. Sono AI, I think, is I may have that wrong. Suno.
We'll get it right in the show notes.
We'll get it right in the show notes, but it's an AI music tool. You can generate songs with lyrics or without. You can write your own lyrics. I've written some songs and had it create the music around it, but I had it create a whole bunch of theatrical music. But I had to create a theme song for that show, and it took me 45 minutes to produce 13 episodes of this show. I read an intro and outro for it, and I'm calling it an after show because it's just chock full of spoilers. But it's an after show for the novel, right?
Yeah.
You've read the novel. If you don't care about spoilers, you're welcome too.
Yeah.
It's content for my YouTube channel that promotes the books. And I'm seeing those numbers rise, little chunks, right? I keep looking for ways to do that. I created a whole bunch of theatrical trailer music, a cinematic soundtrack for the first book in my Kotler series. And I looped it for 3 hours. I use it while I'm writing. Like, it's a great writing soundtrack.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm going to just create one of those for each book, every book I have, and put it up there. And when I push that out to my readers, like, they love it. I mean, they're all over it. I produced an audiobook and put it up on YouTube for free, and I get people all the time saying, I just finished listening to it. And then here's the weird thing. They just heard that whole book for free. They went and bought the ebook or the print book or whatever, or they went and bought the rest of the books in the series.
Yeah.
So, yes, it can help drive sales. It's not doing a ton of that yet, but as it grows, what I'm looking at is, how do I leverage AI and what it can do to increase my discoverability? And you start with what you have. I have a list of about 80,000 people on my list, but about 30,000 of those are on Substack, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I go to that list first and share this stuff with them. They're not going to go, they've already read the books, right? But the thing is, they're helping me now build this other aspect of my platform, which will help me be discovered by new readers. And that's what I'm looking for. So that's what I think people should be focused on when it comes to things like AI. You should be looking at it as like, how do I leverage this? Not to write the books. I mean, God knows there's enough people doing that. And most of us don't want that. We didn't get into this to do that.
Well, yeah, I think that's the crux of it is there are folks that are in the book business, to make product,
right?
And they're going to do it. They've been doing it with ghosts. They do it with
coloring books.
If you're morally offended by that, you're like, just get used to be offended, because that's going to continue to happen,
right?
And there's more failures in that than there is successes.
Yeah.
If you're in this to really practice the art of writing, and not like high literature, but just the act of that creativity,
right?
Whatever that is for you, then how does AI create more time for you?
Right.
And create more audience is what you were just talking about.
That's really what I'm after.
Yeah.
I mean, it does. I need to get better about how it creates more time, because a lot of this stuff can get kind of time intensive. But what I've noticed is, like, I'm putting together templates and processes that make this fairly streamlined.
Yeah, I think that what I'm observing in my life, and this happens more around how we're dealing with things with the show, is you start to think about iterative processes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, well, we're going to do this, and we have to do it. We're going to have to capture this in a spreadsheet, and we're going to have to standardize these things, because I know that that's the first step in us being able to automate things to the next level.
Yeah.
And then, this year we were able, with all the hard work we did last year, to get things to where it's like, okay, now we have the time to go put in these steps or these automations or these processes, and get it so that things flow through. And, for example, we have this process where when Suze clicks the thing saying, this is ready to contract, everything from that point forward, sending out the emails, goes to the sponsor, they fill out the stuff. When it comes in and another thing is triggered, it sends to-do lists to people in the team, so they know that's now time. Just saving the fact of those 4 or 5 emails,
right,
that used to be like, hey, Isabella, it's time to go do those social media things, right? Those little incremental saves. Maybe it's only a 5-minute email, but those were those 5 to 10 emails that just jammed up your day.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I've always been very process driven in this stuff. I try to streamline and automate as much as possible. It's surprising actually that I haven't already done a deep dive using AI to do a lot of that. I think there's a little bit of mistrust on my part, I will admit. But
well, there's also the learning curve, right? Like
Yeah.
I know from this, it's like, okay, this is a lost weekend.
that's the thing. Yeah. And I don't, right now I'm kind of on a little bit of a deadline with this book. And so I can't really afford lost weekends.
Yeah.
But maybe once it's done, I take a week off between books and figure out how to automate as much as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you think about just from this, if you have all that stuff, those books in that thing.
Yeah.
And we talked earlier about how you could create somebody like an agent that was kind of selling folks on the book. But what if it was, kind of like Kevin Tumlinson's Shopkeeper, where it knows all about the books and it can tell them about the books, but also, you didn't get your book.
Right. Yeah.
Now it switches into being the customer service agent.
Right.
Answers the email or goes and gets that book for them. That again becomes a better customer experience.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's already been a study done, and this is what's scary if you're running a massive overseas call center. When they've used AI assisted service, where it can see the corpus of all of your stuff and can answer those questions, it has increased the satisfaction of the customers by 7 times, and it answers questions in like 4 minutes or less.
Yeah.
Right. Because it doesn't have to go through a call sheet and a process. It's like you ask a question, it does this beta. Oh yeah, you're thinking of this really obscure thing over here.
Yeah.
Here's the answer. Or if it doesn't, it gets you into that human call cycle faster.
Yeah.
And they can learn, that's another thing we need to add to the database.
Yeah.
So this is going to change everything. If you're looking at it, like, how can I make AI part of a really cool customer experience? Not writing my books,
right,
but on my website. So when they come up and they say, hey, would you like me to read the book to you in the lost language of...
Yes, exactly. Now, something I am about to try, and I've done this manually. I've done this myself in the past, and I know the readers love it. But I'm going to train the AI to interact with me as my characters.
Yeah.
And so I want to do a full-on interview. But what I really want is, and I'll figure out the pieces to this eventually, like, with AI voice and AI video, I should be able to do a live interview with Dan Kotler, just like I would do a podcast. And so, eventually I'll work up to that. And we're going to start with text first because I can do text.
Yeah.
But the, that advanced stuff, it may be too expensive. It may not be worth pursuing. But...
Yeah, I think, having played around with this, and my son has been doing a lot with AI movies, lip syncing is a little bit janky right now. Yeah. And, most of these AI tools, they're just getting to where they can keep character coherency, which you'd be able to do.
Right.
But as long as you're not doing a lot of scene change, like if it's just kind of a talking head video,
right,
it's going to be the tools are there.
I'm thinking Wordslinger podcast.
Yeah.
I have Dan show up on the show. Yep. And I could always do the old like newsroom thing where, they couldn't establish a video feed, so they just have a photo of the guy out there. Yeah. It's like, all right, no problem. I'll even put a map behind him, So yeah, I can cheat this, but the technology is getting better. And the point isn't like, don't take these ideas and go try to replicate exactly what I'm doing. The point is like, look at this and ask yourself, how many ways can I use this brick? That was one of my favorite exercises in like physics when I was in high school was, the teacher brought up this box, and we each had to go up one at a time and look in it. And all that was in it was a brick. We weren't allowed to say anything. We just had to go back and start writing. And we had to write down as many ways we could think of to use that brick before the timer ran out. And I loved that exercise. Like, I thrive with looking at stuff like that and finding new ways to figure it out. Like I said, I like to break my toys.
Yeah.
So that's what I think we should be doing when it comes to AI, and also really to loop it back around, like conferences like Author Nation and talks like Drew's. Like, that's what we're doing. How many ways can I use this? How there's something important enough about this presentation that Joe paid this guy to show up. What can I take home from it for the low cost of my ticket?
Yeah.
That should be our every waking thought, honestly, with everything we encounter. It's like, how do I use this?
Oh yeah. Well, it's funny you talked about that that brick exercise. Thing that I've been really doing a lot of research and work on this year in my newsletter is this whole idea of with the creative process, understanding you have an executive functioning system, you have your default mode network, your default mode network where you're daydreaming, where you do things like, while you're driving or when you're having a shower. It's like, why do all these good ideas come to you? Mm-hmm. It's because it's that network that makes all the novel processes come together. Yeah. A lot of the research that they do to test people's default mode network is that exact thing that you're talking about, where they if they're seeing if their default mode network and their novel idea creation is coming, is they give them an ordinary object and see how many different other things they can think of it other than like using a fork to eat with. Right. And that two parts to this thing. One is, are you doing anything in your life as an author to strengthen those muscles?
Yeah.
And are you giving yourself the time, right? Because your default mode network doesn't operate under a deadline.
Right.
It doesn't operate. It like, do you, when you get stuck, do you know where to go? Like, do you go drink a beer in the shower? Do you like go drive a road, the way back and forth 100 times?
Yeah.
Because that's where you're going to have those kind of ideas, or a walk or whatever.
The walks are mine. That's what I do the most. Yeah. I've found, especially since we moved here to the Austin area, there's a billion places you could go to walk here. So, it's beautiful, but that's exactly right. And I think also it applies to, we don't want every book to be the same story, just with different dressing. So this is also how you find new plots, and and also how you figure out new ways to market, how you figure out new aspects of your characters. I mean, this is the way to do it, and this is the heart of craft, really. When I hear conversations about craft, this isn't the kind of thing people usually talk about, but I think it's more important to craft than anything else. Like that ability to get into flow and adapt.
Yeah. Well, it's the idea of, if you think about like a professional athlete and what they do to hone their capacity to compete.
Watch the tapes,
condition themselves, right. Warm up, cool down.
Yeah.
But you're not thinking about that from a creative aspect, that you're a creative professional or creative athleticism.
Right.
Well, you've got a natural talent, you daydream, you come up, but how do you do it where you get to where you can produce the best ideas at the right time?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I was just spending a lot of time producing the wrong ideas at the right time. The more you do that, the more, you sort of shake that off. It's kind of good sometimes to get all those bad ideas out.
Yeah. And it made me think, Steph Green and her presentation, she brought up that, her 33rd book was this huge success.
Yeah.
And she's like, how do you get it to have a huge success at 33 books? Is you write 32 flops.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's never really celebrated. But yeah, you have to do all that.
Right. Yeah. I don't by any means think all my early books are flops. I mean, they're not as good as the current book, but I do love that every time I love the fact that every time I write a book, I think it's the best book I've ever written. Now, whether or not my readers agree, that may or may not be reflected in my bank account.
All right, man. Well, why don't you tell folks where they can find you on the airwaves?
The airwaves. I think I'm still part of the Author Nation podcast.
Yeah, you're still the voice of Author Nation, and we talked already.
I will be
emceeing.
25. Yeah. I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully got some new surprises by then. There's things in the works. We'll see. But you can find me online, kevintumlinson.com, and you might want to tune in to the Wordslinger podcast and Writers Inc. I can't forget to mention Writers Inc., which I do with J.D. Barker, Christine Daigle, and Jenna Brown. We were all at Author Nation this past year. The big thing for me right now is go find my Substack, which is called The Writer _. That underscore is meant to be a cursor. There's a whole story behind that. But you can find me if you search my name on Substack, you'll find me. That's a good place. Or find my website. I got a link to it there. So
all right. Good having you on again.
I'm always willing. You know me.
Yeah.
Most dangerous space in the world is that gap between me and that camera.
All right, man. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.